the approach to of looking at religion as a sort of does it stand up to factual?
Yes, and I was thinking Charles Darwin one time wrote to a friend of his, Joseph Hooker, that it would be the better part of wisdom for men of science, as he put it, not to tackle the subject of religion at all. I can see my two colleagues don't agree with that, and I don't agree with it either. In fact, I think everything in natural history, and certainly religion is part of natural history, is grist for the scientific mill. And we should try as far as possible to explain things naturally. In fact, some of the best medieval philosophers and theologians themselves urged natural philosophers to push naturalistic explanations as far as you possibly can, so that theology will never be seen as somehow contradicting or competing with scientific explanations. So as part of natural history, like other living phenomena, religion should be studied by all the sciences. We've learned a lot about religion through the social sciences, psychology, history, and sociology, and archaeology, anthropology, and so forth. So it took a long time for evolutionary biologists to get up the steam to say, well, we're going to talk about this too. But I think it's a good thing, and I frankly think, since from the point of view of biology, I'm as neo-Darwinian as anybody else is, I think it's very important to study religion naturalistically. What I have a problem with, I don't know how the audience feels about this, is that once you have an assumption, or make the assumption, that since we now have a biological explanation for religion, once you make that assumption, does that mean that theological explanations of religion are thereby rendered superfluous? I can't go into it in great detail, but what I would propose as an alternative is what I would call layered explanation. And just to give an example of what I mean, suppose a fire is burning in your backyard and your neighbor comes over and says, explain to me why the fire is burning. Well, one answer you could give, well, the carbon in the wood is turning into carbon dioxide and other gases and giving off heat and so forth, and you could spend a whole career at that level. Or you could also say it's burning because I want to roast some hot dogs. Or you could say, in a more ultimate sense, the fire's burning because I want to have a picnic. Now, the point I want to make with this simple analogy is that there is no conflict at all between or among those three explanations. In other words, you don't say it's burning because of chemistry of combustion rather than because I'm having a picnic, or vice versa. So when it comes to talking about religion, why not try to explain it at different levels? What would rule that out logically? You could say, for example, that in religion, genes are getting passed off into the next generation. Religions are functional and adaptive at that level. But you could also say, and this would still be on a naturalistic plane, that people do religion because they need pattern and meaning, which is quite different from an evolutionary explanation. Or, without contradicting those two levels, it seems to me it's perfectly okay to say, at least in principle, that we do religion because we are born with a capacity for the infinite. St. Augustine talked about capax infinity. Each one of us has this restless desire for the infinite. If you want empirical evidence, it's called shopping. You know? So we have this. So couldn't we say that we do religion because we are being grasped by the infinite? And in saying that, we are not in any way denying evolutionary and other natural explanations for religion. Let's have all three. Let's not place them in unnecessary conflict with each other.
What I hear you saying then is that there are overlapping explanations in that way. We may not have overlapping magisteria, but overlapping explanations. I want to give Dr. Dennett the last word on this particular question, if you'd like to respond.
Well, I think that everything you've said is potentially consistent with what scientists find out. Let's find out. Are we born with an appetite for infinity? Or I'm not sure if that was quite your phrase, but maybe we are, or maybe it's culturally imbued, and if so, then we want to know why. And are we different from other animals in having this taste for the infinite? Is this something that all human beings have? And if so, why is this particular feature of human psychology playing this role? This is a possible explanation. I think it has to compete with many other possible explanations, which are also scientific, but they are at the level that you're talking about. They're at the level of people's beliefs and desires, at what I call the intentional stance, and you do have to characterize the content of these beliefs in order to make sense of them. Certainly, you're not going to talk about the chemical composition of the people. You're going to talk about the contents of their beliefs. But that's just as subject to scientific evaluation and analysis and explanation. So it's not clear to me yet that there are any specifically theological explanations of anything that don't have to be in the court of science and win that contest.
Okay. I'd like to move on simply because there's a very interesting question that is out there in the work of Dr. Wilson, and that is, given the prevalence of religions in the world now, is there some sort of advantage, natural advantage, to being religious that you have been able to look at and examine?
Well, in the taxonomy of conceptions of religion that I gave earlier, there are those which are adaptive explanations and those which are not. And amongst the scholars studying this, including evolutionists studying this, there's still a fair amount of disagreement as to whether religion counts as a byproduct, for example, of traits that evolve for things that have nothing to do with religion, and whether it is whether it is good for anything at all. And I'll give you one example of a byproduct explanation, not due to a sociologist, Rodney Stark, not an evolutionist, but his theory of religion is that it's inspired by economic theory, so it's Homo economicus. We're real good at forming explanations, cost benefits, stuff like that, gets us lots of stuff. But then there's things we don't have and can't have, like rain during a drought and or everlasting life. That doesn't stop it from wanting it. And so what religion is the invention of the gods with whom we bargain for that which we can't have. It is the economic mind spinning its wheels. You know, if only we could turn off our economic mind, then we wouldn't have any need for the gods. And we don't pray to God to convey us to work in the morning, but we do pray to God for everlasting life. And so according to that hypothesis, you could study religion all you want, and you will not find practical benefits associated with religion. Okay? So there's a byproduct theory of religion. I think that the evidence is very, very strong at this point, that not only is religion useful, but it is useful for the community of religious believers. And this is essentially the opinion that Durkheim had. It's taken 100 years for us to come back to the position that Durkheim had, that we are a symbolic species, that we are, and this is taking culture seriously from an evolutionary perspective, means that we do not get most of our behaviors directly from our genes. We get them from our cultures. And what's culture but a meaning system? And I think that when John talked about, the search for the infinite, the restless aspect of human nature can be exactly right, because we're in the business of constructing meaning systems. And it's from meaning systems that organizes our perception and basically tells us what to do. So when you think of all of the different meaning systems that are possible, an infinite variety of meaning systems at the production end, that's not true at the survival end. There's a winnowing process for cultural systems, just as there is for biological systems. And what you end up with are cultural systems that are well adapted to their environments. And just to give you an example, to keep this short, I've done some work with my former graduate student Ingrid Storm, comparing liberal versus conservative Protestant denominations. Okay? So what's the difference between a Seventh-day Adventist and a Unitarian? It's a big difference. And this is like installing different software in your heads and causing you to do very, very different things. And One nice thing about that is that, of course, conservatism and liberalism exist